Tonight's Spring Hope Town Board meeting is presented by the Southern Nash News and Tar River Studios. Tonight's meeting is sponsored by the Spring Hope License Plate Agency. The Spring Hope License Plate Agency is recently under new management and features short lines and a friendly staff. Dealer work is always welcome, notary services are available, and copies can always be made. Wildlife services, hunting and fishing licenses, boat registrations, and boat title work is also available. Visit the Spring Hope License Plate Agency on Ash Street 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Once again, tonight's meeting is sponsored by the Spring Hope License Plate Agency.
Monday, May 2nd. We are going to call this meeting to order. The first thing we're going to complete is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all stand, please, face the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Next, we're going to ask Pastor Cynthia if she'll say a quick opening prayer for us.
Good evening to all commissioners, to each and every one. Father, we ask you, Almighty and Holy One, that you will bless this meeting, carry it out according to your will and to your way. Father, we thank you, O God, for allowing us to come together again, God, that we might strategize in the conditions and the cares of your great town. Father, we ask you right now to be in the midst of this meeting, carry it out according to your will and according to your way. We thank you now that we all are dealing with various situations in our lives, but we know that you are sovereign and that you are mighty, and we thank you for being in the midst of us on today. We ask this in thy blessed name, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, next up, we need to approve the minutes from last month's meeting. I'll give you all a minute to look over those. All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Next up, informal discussion and public comment. Michelle, do we have anybody? No. Okay. All right. Next up, approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda as written?
Make a motion to approve tonight's agenda as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So we'll jump right into the agenda with old business. Update on 205 West Main Street. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The remediation and demolition contractor had to pause work. The materials, they found some suspect materials. They went to a testing lab. We are just waiting the results of that materials testing. Once we get those materials testing results in, we anticipate the demolition to continue, the facade to come down, and for the void space to be filled, and then the project will be complete.
What materials were they, if I may ask?
Just the wooden and brick.
Oh, good.
Right. The landfill just saw something funny in one of the loads and requested that we do some testing.
So it could be nothing.
It's most likely nothing.
Okay.
The remediation contractor seems to think that there really isn't anything wrong.
Okay.
Did the contractor ever provide anything about how they're gonna dig out the loose backfill where they just push the bricks in the cellar area?
The plan is to utilize some of those materials as fill and bring in clean fill as necessary.
Okay.
If warranted.
Okay. All right. Next up on the agenda, new business, water and sewer rates. So I think we're going to stay down at this end of the board. Mr. DeYoung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So around about March, we requested North Carolina Rural Water Authority conduct a rate study. You have the preliminary report for that rate study. I am still waiting more information on the full range and scope of the amended rates, and when I have that, I will be able to make a recommendation to the board in terms of where those rates should lie, likely next month.
Now, I believe there was maybe Commissioner Combs can educate us on this, there was a plan that was put in place a while back that was supposed to incorporate some, water rate increases over the past 5 years, but we actually skipped them because of COVID, I believe. So it's been a long time coming, and I think that's a continuation of that discussion.
Actually, that was before I came into office. The commissioners had passed a 20-year plan that had a schedule of smaller increases, affecting more of the commercial and business than than the residential. There was some residential increases, but that 20-year plan was part of before we got all the ARPA funds and everything else, kind of start refurbishing the water system. So I thought they got, those guys did good. I think Ms. Wilkins and Commissioner Griffin, Ms. Lucas and Commissioner Griffin were here, and so they can speak better about it than I can. But I was at the meeting when they did it, so that it is overdue.
You wanna touch on it?
Yeah. What,
Yes, sir.
it may be in here, what is the number of residents that all these numbers are projected from, the number they're using?
The number of,
Where they come up with, for them to come up with this rate, and for them to come up with this budget of how much money we're gonna get revenue, there's gotta be a number they're using for.
that we provided them all the data points for the town, so every single user in every single category, and,
Can we,
Sandra Morris actually provided that data to North Carolina Rural Water.
can I see that data? What Sandra provided?
Sure.
Okay.
And for the good news that, we know, about the enterprise, I don't know if that's something you wanna speak on about another, good reason that we're talking about this now. I don't know if now is the time or not, but that's it.
No, that's in the planning stages.
Okay,
Still in the
okay.
planning stages.
But there are good things to come, just know that, it's not, unwarranted. All right, next up on the agenda, we've got garbage and recycling rates. Mr. Gianna?
The board was provided, we requested a GFL, the waste hauling contractor, the contract, I should start from the beginning, the contract expires at the end of this fiscal year with GFL, so I requested a revised rate structure going forward. You see that there are two alternatives. One is to continue the current service with a recycling bin. In order to continue that service, rates would have to go up $1 per month. To move from the current recycling bin to a 65-gallon toter cart, the rates would have to go up $2 a month.
What kind of feedback, commissioners, are y'all getting? Are those small totes enough for recycling, or are people wishing they had a big cart?
I wish I had a big car.
I do too.
Yeah.
It often
Stuff gets
functions,
scattered.
it often functions to keep the town cleaner. You have less stuff blowing all over town as they're waiting to get picked up.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it's open, just come right out.
How much are they currently charging? I know that's an option now. What is it? What's the current extra charge if you wanted that 65-gallon? I can't remember.
Michelle, do you know off the top of your head?
It's an extra $10 a month.
An extra $10 a month. So it'd be $1 now instead of 10.
Well, we're charging an extra $10 a month.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how, what the charge will be, just to even it out, so that we don't lose money.
Will we have some kind of a way of getting feedback from all the residents if they would wanna get the bigger carts versus what we have now? At least get a general pool of what they, cause it would affect it, I mean, it's only $2, but still,
I think GFL keeps records of all the recycling, and she said that we had a lot, that ours was, huge, but I can ask what those numbers.
Commissioners, any other questions on water and sewer rates or garbage and recycling rates at this time?
Are they looking for approval right now, Andrew?
On,
Yeah,
we would have to have it before the end of the fiscal year, so it doesn't have to be a decision rendered tonight. We're trying to bring the board as much information as early as possible, so that when we finally adopt the budget, you're comfortable with your decision-making process. So that's what we've been trying to do, is front-load the information.
And it was brought up at the last meeting when they did the audit, that the water and sewer department is basically, without the grant money, it's operating like I think a $20,000 negative. So it's, I mean, if we don't do it, we're gonna have to find grant money every year.
In referring back to the audit results, Mr. Mayor, it's actually the depreciation. So if you factor in the depreciation, that's where the negative number comes from. But we can structure the rate increase to capitalize basically that depreciation, so then it does not, count, in a negative fashion towards the town.
Commissioners, any questions on those two agenda items? More information to come. Next on the agenda, we've got the contract for engineering services.
Mr. Mayor, that's actually, while they're an engineering company, the contract you have before you is for Stewart Design. They will actually be providing planning and land use ordinance amendments. So while this, the terms of the contract won't fundamentally change, I have asked them to break it up over 2 fiscal years. So there'll be less of a hit in this coming fiscal year. So the 21-5-20 would be spread over 2 fiscal years, the course of 2 fiscal years. But the scope of service will be fundamentally the same. They will review the town's ordinances. Of course, we're not 160D compliant, but they will review the zoning, and they will make recommendations in terms of updating our land development regulations, including the subdivision regulations.
Is there a time that this gets accomplished, or that they can't drag this out for, I mean?
Well, I've asked Chad Seri to break it up so that we will have 2 usable components. And he hasn't done the scope of work that way yet, so when I see that,
Okay.
I'll be able to better share that, Commissioner Jeffries.
But ultimately around 24 months, around 2 years to complete it.
It will probably be a lot quicker than that, but yeah, I mean, we'll spread the burden out over 2 fiscal years, but it'll probably be closer to an 18-month process, maybe a little bit less.
And this will essentially catch us up as far as zoning ordinances and regulations, kind of into 2022 as far as how to protect ourselves from things like what happened in Walnut Cove. Is that correct?
Well, Walnut Cove, basically there was none of the zoning was changed in Walnut Cove that was pre-existing, so none of what I'm proposing, right?
Yeah.
More, I think what you're thinking of, Mr. Mayor, is Bryson's Bridge, where the zoning was changed.
Yes.
But,
Any questions? All right. Next item on the agenda, May and place bookkeeping contract for fiscal year ending in 2022.
Okay, the LGC, which is part of the state treasurer's office, has now, well, in the past couple of years, has, new regulations. We can have an auditor, but we have to have a separate bookkeeper. So we're gonna, May in place, also did our bookkeeping last year, so we're hoping to, get them to do it this year as well. And then we're gonna also have the contract for the auditor, which was 2 separate firms. It's gonna be a different firm than it was last year. So we'll have a contract for bookkeeping and then one for the auditor, which is mandated by the state of North Carolina.
Have we worked with Thomas Price Scott Adams before?
No. But they come very highly rated.
Complete outside source. That is good.
Because May and Place has had on the boat for a while.
About 5 years, yeah.
I know they've been doing it since I've been.
And as for the other audit that was completed not too long ago, is everything with that finished, completed? Did they give us any follow-up tasks, or is there anything left to do?
Well, it's now in the hands of the, state of North Carolina, so we have to wait for them.
Okay. All right, that takes care those two items. Next
Need
up.
approval? Do we need approval on these
Approval on contract?
Yes,
don't we?
please.
What-
Okay, I make a
what about
motion,
Stewart?
we approve the contract with May Place for bookkeeping services.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carries, the contract has been approved. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
And also make a motion that we approve the contract for, audit services with Thompson Price Scott Adams and Company.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Next item on the agenda.
Yes. Do we need to start this, so this starts now?
No, we can wait until, next month, Commissioner Jeffries.
So, you want them to redo it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They're making the scope of
I
work.
got you, okay, thank you. Sorry. Go ahead, Coach.
Advertising for delinquent taxes. Michelle?
Okay, so our tax collector, Sandra Morris, has written a memo so that you can understand about the unpaid taxes. She can only hold them for a certain amount of time. Well, no, actually, I'm sorry, these are the taxes that are owed for 2021. So these are the people that are delinquent, and, according to state statute, we have to advertise and we have to get approval from the board. So we just need approval to, advertise the delinquent taxes.
So I make a motion, we approve the advertisement of delinquent taxes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, and we'll look in the newspaper for those delinquent taxes. Thank you, Michelle. Next up is a budget amendment 2022-05. Mr. Biano, do you want to explain this?
I think it's Michelle.
Okay, so as the finance officer, I have to also do budget amendments, and, by the end of the fiscal year, I'll come up short as far as, salaries and wages in, water and sewer, and I have to have approval from the board to change anything that has to do with salaries. And I'm gonna take the money out of supplies and materials, it's just $2,000, which is switching expense for expense, it's not changing it actually, it's just doing for the accountants for me. Now, I just need approval on that.
Make a motion, we approve budget amendment 2022-05, moving money from supplies and materials and salaries and wages.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Michelle, thank you for keeping our budget perfectly in line. All right, next up, we have the town attorney's report.
Nothing much to report except just, where we were last month was the sale of the building to Pentel Oil Services had not been completed, that has been completed. And, the deeds have been conveyed to, Pentel Oil. We're waiting on our check, but I got confirmation this morning that the check's on the way to pay the town $5,000. And then it'll just be the buyer's obligation to repair the buildings according to the agreement, so.
Have we started moving storage stuff down to connections?
Yes. But that's the only item I have to report.
And he's probably already done over $5,000 in demolition. If y'all remember this, he's got it ripped out, he started immediately, so there was no delay there. That was good. Next up, I don't see EnviroLink's report.
John Nelson texted and said he had an emergency and would not be here to provide a report.
Okay. Wise man.
Do we have, so they didn't even.
Report should be down there on the bottom.
Wise man.
Yeah, it was passed out separate from the back.
This is not gonna
What's
last.
that?
It was passed out separate from the back.
Okay. I mean,
Have we discussed delinquent leaf and limb pickup with those guys?
We have.
I'm asking a question, I know the answer to it.
Yes, we have discussed it on numerous occasions.
We're waiting for that 70-mile-an-hour wind to come through and blow everything to Beaumont.
Yeah.
We have discussed it on numerous occasions, we have been assured that they would be catching up next week, this week, and the piles only seem to get bigger, so.
I got lucky, my neighbor used mine as a fire pit, in his fire pit, so it worked out.
Yeah.
that was something that I heard when I went out this weekend passing out the newsletters.
a lot of people have got, stuff that's been sitting there for 3 weeks.
And I guess they didn't issue any updates for no parking signs.
No, that's another lagging work order. There were several. Cleaning out the Ash Street properties was another, basically had initiated that process today, so.
And I know when you give your manager report, well, there's some other good news and responses concerning that. I'll hold, I don't wanna steal your thunder.
Alright, so nobody's here from Ireland, so we're gonna move on to the police chief's report. Chief?
We had 5 reported incidents, 141 total calls for service, 17 vehicle stops, 106 security checks, 3 traffic accidents, and 0 stop or lights were out. And if you guys have seen, we did pick up the new addition to our fleet.
What's that?
The little golf cart parked to the side.
I still wanna see you in it.
Can't fit it in our orange shop.
Paul Blart comes with
Yeah.
that.
It's just, something we got to be able to do pumpkin festival, to be able to, like, if the road's blocked down and you've got that, it's got the flatbed on it, in case somebody would get hurt during the festival or something, we can put them on the back and get them out.
Great idea.
Total different things, carrying
Great
cones
idea.
around, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's enclosed, it's waterproof, it's got a heater, windshield wipers. It's technically a low-speed vehicle, it has a VIN number, it'll run about 40 miles an hour. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You just can't get a big truck.
I can. I can lay on the back, and they can drive me around.
Put your recliner
back there.
You don't have to, it's,
I'm messing.
well, it's actually, since it's a low-speed vehicle, it doesn't have to have a permit, it's gonna be a registered vehicle.
And that come from the DOD also?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, we just picked it up last week. I've been putting in for a lot of trucks, and I'm just a hair late every single time, so.
So far you've got us the Connexes.
We got
and
4
this
Connex
vehicle.
boxes and the golf cart so far, and I'm trying to get a vehicle. That's the big one I'm on now, and once I can get, and what I'm aiming to get is something in a 2500 series truck, low miles, and then after I do that, the next thing's gonna be the trailer. And then, once we've got that, then it's endless, we can get whatever we wanna get, be able to actually go pick it up. Side by sides, yeah. I put in for a couple side by sides and I got beat out to it. But I mean, they're all used military stuff. I mean, the condition, a lot of this stuff is really bad, so you gotta be really picky. Or you'll end up spending, even though it's free, you'll end up spending more money on it than you would.
I got a question on
Yes,
the
sir.
April 4th, the firearm discharged within town. Is anything done with that firearm?
It's in our possession.
Okay.
Hopefully, will be sold to a FFL dealer once he's convicted.
Okay, I didn't know what took place there.
Chief, did you wanna talk about, the new Canine Officer at all?
I can, as a couple of you guys know, we right now we're in a little bit of a transition. Officer Radford, is no longer employed with us. He was our prior K9 handler. Once, Radford resigned, I had to act pretty quick because he resigned on a Friday and the next K9 school started on the following Monday. So I appointed Officer Barber to become the new K9 officer. He will be operating the K9 vehicle. Officer Linhart's moved over to the truck. So it's the truck is not gonna be Barber anymore. Everybody says, I gotta write to everybody tickets, but Barber is in the K9 vehicle and, Linhart is now in the truck. Barber should be graduating around the 13th. It's a 6-week school, so the timing worked out really good to where we didn't have any downtime. It was an immediate start class and then get done with it. I've got one officer that's out injured right now, so I'm about 3 guys down. Waiting on paperwork to come back for the new hire, so hopefully everything, it all left us real quick, hopefully it comes back real quick too, and we're back where we need to be.
We brought on one person that's uniquely qualified, I think, very well experienced,
The lieutenant who replaced, Lieutenant Proctor, yes sir.
Yeah, we got lucky there.
Lieutenant Leary. He started his career in Nash County. He's got about 23, 24 years. Me and him actually worked together back in the 90s when we were both at Nash County. He was actually my supervisor.
And I crossed,
Yes. he's out injured reserve right now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I crossed paths with a couple of the officers this weekend, and they both said that there's a general theme amongst this police department that they all stay here because of the way that they get treated by their superiors. It's not for their salary. They can obviously leave and go get paid better somewhere else. So that is the morale that is amongst the police officers.
It's good to hear.
throughout.
It's good to hear. Actually, the officer that came in took a $4,500 pay cut to join us.
And I would also point out that the chief has made some personal sacrifice to fill in the blanks with these missing officers, working a lot of extra hours and so on. So thank you to you, chief, for doing all that.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief.
Did you see my eyes were looking a little tired?
Yeah, you look
Yeah. All right, next up, town manager's report, and are you also gonna review the public forum policy?
No, that was just what we did last month.
Okay.
I just wanted y'all to have it.
A printed copy of it.
Yeah.
Michelle wanted to memorialize it for you, so
Yes,
that
I
you
did.
had it for reference.
Thank you.
I can run through this, or you all can ask me questions based on the report. That's entirely up to you. I will mention this, that yesterday afternoon I was able to submit the grant to NC Commerce for $950,000 for rehabbing the railroad depot, so that went off without a hitch. And then I found out late this afternoon that they had extended the deadline to May 4th. But that's okay, we got ours in on time, and so hopefully we'll get funded on that. Those are the state's allocation of ARPA funds through NC Commerce. Been working on obviously a lot of utilities issues, one of them being the tank contract, the tank maintenance contract, and met with both a representative of the current vendor, which is now known as Veoli, and also Southern Corrosion. We're working on that. You know about the land development regs, the demolition, you're up to date on that, grant. The community building, we did discover some mold spores. It was not serious and not impactful. I do think we can rehab the community building for not a lot of money. I did have an architect walk through there with me along with the railroad building, and she seemed to think that the chimney flashing could be the culprit of water intrusion. So that should be a relatively easy fix, and we could bring the community building, if we have a good fiscal year and aren't too tight on other costs, maybe we could even do that this upcoming fiscal year. You're up to date on the budget. We're trying to get you as much information as we possibly can, and hopefully Michelle has worked very hard on fleshing out those figures and making them as realistic as possible, so you all have a real sense of both the general fund and the enterprise. Both on the revenue side, revenues are always projections, but especially on the expenditures. Streets and sidewalks, we did get a second quote, and it was actually a very favorable quote, and we were actually, for less money, able to add a stretch of sidewalk here by First Citizens that looks pretty dicey. So we will move forward with that in the coming weeks and revamp some of those sidewalks. We did hire a director of public works. He started today. Mr. Bobby Ball has 29 years experience in water and sewer, 14 years in the town of Wake Forest, and he seems to be a good addition. He's a local guy and lives in Lewisburg, so he lives right up the road. There was no planning board business this month. We will wait to see. I'm still waiting on amended plans for Bryson's Ridge based on what Wooten recommended for changes. I actually spoke with Tom White late this afternoon about that. He said his engineer, Stocks, would have him something at this point this week. There are 4 state permits that are pending those amended plans, so it's in his best interest to do so as quickly as possible. The Downtown Development Board, we had a very good working meeting. Deanne Rivera is an excellent chairperson, and the board is working really hard to move the mural project forward and start up some fresh initiatives, or restart some fresh initiatives, so that's looking very good. And you have the audit information.
What's the budget on the mural?
Well, there's going to be an RFQ process, so the budget remains to be seen. I would say it's realistic to think in terms of thousands of dollars, let's say $5,000 or so.
Okay. Number one of your report, was Mike Tolson supposed to be here to go over his water plans in detail?
That was what he told the board at last month's meeting, if I recall correctly.
You recall correctly.
He's done.
Well, I will say that we did have an RFQ process for engineers to help us with the $3.7 million as is mandated by the state. We did get one response. I had to re-advertise it as required by the state. We re-advertised it. We only still received the one response. So the firm we will be working with is Wooten Engineers, Wooten Company, both out of Raleigh and Greenville. I had a discussion late last week. Wooten, I've worked with the guys in Greenville before, and they're excellent engineers. They have done projects for the town before. I actually have one of them sitting on my desk. Looking forward to working with them. I think they'll be excellent, not just for the $3.7 million, but they've had good luck lately actually getting grants from DEQ for additional funding. So I think that all looks promising, and looking forward to working with them.
Any idea when we'll be able to submit our first batch of plans to the state and start some work?
Well, we hope to have a kickoff meeting in the next week or so, and then I'll be able to give you a better projects timeline sometime thereafter. Hopefully, by our June meeting.
Commissioner Jeffers?
Yeah, I know you talked about it, getting the maintenance for our tanks to understand the condition they're in and do that, but also I think it's imperative, and maybe you can do your magic, you and Michelle can do your magic, but we need to know, or need to be able to understand how much is in the tanks at all times. We need to be able to understand at all times when it's peak and we're filling everybody's whatever, that we need to know what's being drawn out of our tanks with the size of the town right now, because we're gonna put some more houses on it, and we need to know that sooner than later.
That was one of the recommendations that Southern Corrosion made in my discussions with them, is a proper metering system and not relying on a float system, which is notoriously faulty.
Floats, but there's PSI systems and there's sensors that you can do too, so I think maybe that's something you could get some quotes anyway. I think people will give you quotes that won't cost you nothing just to get something, because we need to know what we're pumping out and know what we have before we start opening valves to 250 houses.
Yeah, I think those are excellent suggestions, and those have been part of the discussions that were initiated by the representative from Southern Corrosion.
And am I allowed to say that? Maybe I'm not allowed to say that. They're good.
Well, every other community,
I just want to say that.
every other community and the county utilizes Southern Corrosion.
Maybe I'm not
We're
allowed.
kind of the outlier.
If you go through South Carolina, go through, South Carolina, the Big Peach, they got none. That's it.
But anyway, you can scratch that.
I didn't hear a thing.
Okay.
Quick question on the project budget estimate summary for the library building. It's coming around 1.28. Is that for just that one building?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, I've been involved, with some really large projects, and that's a very small footprint to spend 1.2 million on. Is there any way that the board can see how this contractor is justifying 1.2 million on a square?
Yeah, that's not a contractor, that's an architect, and she just did a very rough estimate.
Okay.
Based on an unknown scope of work.
Okay, okay.
And that is really, I asked her to do that as a favor, so that we could lend credence to our budget request. The fact of the matter is, it's gonna be a lot less than that.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the site work alone, I think she carried a line item for $50,000 worth of site work, and there's no way we could ever put that much site work into that, area.
I see, very smart. So you're getting us the maximum amount.
Well, yeah.
and it'll come down with the actual contract. Very smart, thank you. Other question about the library, so I've heard about the plans to what the building may become. What are the plans for the library?
Well, that's still very much up in the air, obviously. Having a library in Spring Hope is important. We still have plenty of time to discuss an alternative location for the library, both temporary and permanent. Fact of the matter is, we won't hear about this grant until August, and likely take 2 or 3 months just to get the contract doc signed. So that's about half a year right there, just to start mulling things over. And if you, a realistic timetable for construction, from design is probably about 12 months. So it's about 1.5 years before that project will actually be done, but it will give us plenty of time to find alternatives.
All right. Commissioners, that was a lot of information on the manager report. Any questions?
I think I'm more excited about number 9 than anything else.
Yes, I agree, I met Bob, a nice guy.
He's very low key, very down to earth, and we're very glad to have him. Numbers.
We are headed in the right direction.
He represents the means to the end.
Yes,
That's what I'm.
sooner than later.
And he's a local guy, family from here, been here.
We gotta be quiet.
A long time, that's good.
All right, and we are almost to the end. We got other business. We will start with Commissioner Jeffries for other business.
No, I just wanna say that I wanna thank Andrew and Michelle and Sandra and those for what they've done in the past months. They've done a lot. I know I went in there half unscrewed one day, because I didn't think it was going fast enough, but I'll never feel that. But they are moving. I want everyone to know that they're moving in the right direction. We're headed in the right direction. When you start dealing with federal money, there's not much we can do about that. That's their speed, and that's what we gotta deal with. But they're finding and they're doing, and so I wanna thank them for all that they've done and they are doing.
Mr. Lucas? All right. All I've got is a couple of notes from residents that I talked with this weekend about some concerns they've got. At the end of East Branch Street, the street goes from about 30 feet wide down to about 16 feet wide. And you can see on the side or the edge of the road where there's a lot of cars constantly run off. And the residents that live in that area, and I experienced it the other night, we never go down that road, but we went down it just to see when you have oncoming traffic. Any of you that have traveled on East Branch, when there's oncoming traffic, one of the cars usually ends up stopping and pulling off the road to let the other one go through. And then we see that same exact problem when you come up the hill at the railroad tracks at the cemetery. And the concern, finish up East Branch, is not only does it go from 30 feet to 16 feet right at the end, but then it's bumpy, and then where people run off the road, it's kind of like ditch and run it out, and it just makes for a very unsafe environment. But then at the top of the railroad tracks at the cemetery, probably about 10 feet past the tracks, once you crest the hill, there's like a ditch drain, and I got a picture of it here. And it's about a foot, less than a foot from the edge of the road. And if you go, you notice when you go up that hill, and there's been a lot of concern about not only motorists but pedestrians too. And so when you drive up that hill at the railroad tracks, it's not until you get to the crest that you notice the road kind of turns a little bit. So if there's a truck or a trailer, a lot of people use that as a bypass. That's like the Spring Hope bypass, that street. And so if it's a truck and a trailer with equipment, they get up there and there's another car coming, the chances of that car hitting that ditch, that culvert I think it's called, or pedestrian getting, pushed into that is dangerous. So that was a concern that was brought up. I got some pictures and stuff there of it. And then on Franklin Street, Brent, Commissioner Cone, you may see Franklin Street, those guys have mentioned it every time I got my back door.
Where it dumps into Walnut Street.
Yeah. This was brought up last year, and I sat on Pine Street for about an hour this weekend, and the traffic coming into town on Pine Street, they don't slow down until they take the curve and actually start coming towards downtown. So once they go past Spalding, they're still going 55. They come into town past that first section of residential, still going 55. And I know a lot of times for residents, if you're sitting there, it's hard to tell if they're going 35 or 55. And so if the speed limit is 35 and the people really are going 35, if we could provide them some data, but there's also recently been a lot of complaints about people turning out of Ash Street and racing down Pine Street, we're in that wide area right there. So if we could have some, or any recommendations from the board about that area?
I've got the speed trailer out
So
there.
I saw the speed trailer down there, so he's collecting some data, that's good.
And then at the end of Gum Avenue, the small park down there at the very end, right when the street turns, those guys are, every time I go down there, they talk about cats, that there's a cat problem. Okay, so that's what needs to happen there? Okay, okay. And he said, when you walk around town, you smell cats everywhere. And so that was a concern. I see people shaking their head. Okay. The ones that are on town property, would that be something that the town could call about?
Cats on town property?
There.
Yeah, I mean, if we thought there was a cat problem, yeah, we would call animal control.
Okay.
Most of them are contained, I think, to the bulls.
The
The
field
blue
where
warehouse.
Poplar is that property?
A warehouse.
The blue warehouse.
It has its own cat door.
And then one final question that I didn't know the answer to, Meek Cemetery, who maintains that and where can, residents find maps of where people are
So Meek
buried?
Cemetery belongs to Town Spring Hope,
Okay,
and there are, several sections of the, cemetery that I do not have a map for.
okay,
So we do the best we can. And I know that's not a great answer, but there's just no maps. Some maps were, destroyed in a flood about 20-some odd years ago. And so unfortunately, there's a lot of residents that are no longer with us, and there's hardly any families left either. So me and Clinton right now are looking for a grave, and it's not easy. We have to go out there now. He's gonna probe for me this week. So, like I said, we have to rely a lot on families, because there is none, and there's no headstones. But that is our section.
is there any state programs that come in and help? I'm sure there's gotta be a
Even
situation.
if they did, I mean, I don't even have any names of the people that are in there, that's the issue. There's just no records at all. It's not,
And does Environment cut the grass out there?
yeah.
When they do cut the grass?
Yeah.
But then shortly we'll be cutting it soon with our own in-house. Alright, that's all I have, just a few concerns, and then I've got some pictures and stuff, if you want to share those. Commissioner Griffin?
Nothing tonight?
Commissioner
So,
Stoll?
I mean, the entrance to Franklin, I know that'll be covered with pavement of Walnut. I know that's been discussed between Virginia and Walnut, I know those are first up on the list.
And paving, I've been asked a lot about paving in general, and we've been holding off on doing any major paving. Obviously, we have patched potholes.
Yep.
And we'll continue to do that to make the roads safe and drivable, but it doesn't make any sense to do any major paving when you're going to rip up large swaths of town to replace infrastructure, so.
Well, the one particular place at Franklin, we was talking about before, it's actually a concrete slab. It looks like it was prepared using concrete versus asphalt, and that's what's failing, is the concrete. So maybe we could look at having somebody come out there, because the residents are, you hear bottoming out when they're coming out of Franklin.
Alright.
Commissioner Williams?
I'm gonna defer my time to the chamber if y'all update.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that, normally on the agenda, and I mentioned it last month, there's a slot that says chamber updates, and I know I missed it again tonight on the consent agenda, so we don't wanna leave Ethan out.
I appreciate you.
Ms. Wilkins is right.
Yielding your time, I'll use it very, quickly. I did wanna just say thank you for everybody that came out to the car show, Saturday. We're also equally as thankful that the rain did not show up, to the car show on Saturday. But, we did have a total of about 88 official entrants. just about low 90s cars in attendance. There were some that were just for show and did not compete, but we had a great turnout. I do want to thank Leanne and Stan Hanoff, Tim Rice, and we'll just call them the chamber group for pulling that off. It was a great success, and I saw a lot of traffic in and out of the stores downtown, so I hope that the merchants capitalized just as we did. Anything else? Any questions from the board?
Where are we on our big pumpkin planting?
I do have one question about a site survey and 811 call before you dig. Work order.
Michelle, did we ever get a response on 811 on the dig safe for
Not to
the
my
water line?
knowledge, I know that,
Ooh.
environment did the water and sewer.
Yep, I saw their markings there for the water spigot.
Alright, we'll have to check on that.
Yeah, there is a power line that I'm concerned about possibly entangling some roots, so I prefer to know what snares are for us before we start finding things to back up. So, alright. Anything else? Yield my time.
Make sure you thank the garden club, they have it looking pretty.
Yes, I did have
Thank
many,
you, thank you.
I sent my remarks to them by email this week. I did hear a lot of, compliments on streetscapes by people visiting town, and I often ask, who maintains all of it, because they notice the consistency. So, they do a great job. Thank you.
Ethan, we are going to start, doing a few things around the library, so I'm glad to hear you're not gonna tear it down while we're planning.
Oh, no.
But, we're gonna do that, and we'll have since we don't have a water source, we'll be running our hose down there with water. And somebody keeps turning off the timer on the sucker hose on the long planter, and I put it in a little thing there, said, please do not turn it off, because the sun operates that. When the sun comes out, the timer comes on, so, everything else. We're gonna be very busy over there in the next couple of weeks.
Andrew, I do know, I'm not sure if they changed it, there used to be a water access under the depot, because that's what we had to use for Pumpkin Festival before the chamber installed all of the water hookups along Main Street here, or Railroad Street. There may be an access under the building, and I know we talked about them being behind the work orders, if there was a way we could get in there, tie into it, and maybe run the hose out. And that would keep them from having to stretch it all the way down from Pine Street back
Yes,
over.
cause people run over it constantly, and I would think, how many hoses, that would be grand too.
Yeah, and they may have eliminated it when they redid the water, I'm not sure, I haven't crawled under the depot to see, but it was down further to this end, and we had to crawl under there every year and run a bunch of hoses out to vendors.
Good.
I yield back. Thank you.
Alright, if there is no other business, then the last thing to do is adjourn. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Alright, all in favor say aye. Motion has been adjourned. Thank you all for attending.